side looks like a commercial from a insurance company, safety and security. But note the tree on the left and the car beyond it on Route 14 in South Royalton, and there's a river just beyond that. For the next slide, you'll be looking at that tree again from a different orientation. Mr. Snowman in front. And you can see the river a little better beyond, and the other opposite bank looks like an absolute black void. It's a very large island that I thought protected the house, with the main stem of the rivers on the other side. And you'll see that in the next slide what happens. So after Irene, look at the debris hanging down from the tree for the height of the river. And the island is half gone. And the main stem is switched over to this side of the river. This house is not in the mapped flood hazard area. But I'm a longtime planner who's worked with towns around the state on hazard mitigation planning, so I should never have bought this house. But I knew enough to buy flood insurance, even though the banker looked at me and said, "Why? You're not being required to." And you'll see that section of road was washed out all the way from one end to the other. So this is a familiar scene for a lot of you, the hundreds of volunteers that showed up at the house. And this woman, among many, said, "I've always loved this house since I was a little girl." It was built in 1805, so it's an old historic house. And so what do you do? What do you do in this situation? So I obviously am going to have some money when I finish wrangling with the insurance agents, but do you rebuild and sell? New materials, new floors, new kitchen, and it's not going to be enough money. I'm in a town with no zoning, and I'm outside the flood zone, so I can do whatever I want. In the same token, I'm not eligible for a demolition or buyout or moving or elevating for any kind of funds from FEMA. So that's, what do? Do you raise or raise, tear it down or put it up? You still have a mortgage to pay off. So it went way up. And then the people, who cashiers in the store said, "I get what you're doing now. You don't plan to be hit again." And Don Messier, who was a guru, the mover who did it. I was very fortunate to get him. But you can see steel girders going through the house. And the torquing and twisting and raising it. I did more damage to the house in raising it than Irene did. So you see the garage, which is now gone on one side, that didn't survive and didn't get to go up to new heights along with the house. There's no windows on the upstream side of the basement. And I asked for more rebar in the floor and on the upstream side, and the concrete contractor put his arm around me and said, "Honey, this is never going to happen again in your lifetime." So I started speaking in terms of stewardship of a historic home that you build for the next 200 years. It's a 200-year-old house rather than for just the next 30. So in the meantime, I'm trying to think about how to make this look normal and protect it further. This is the view from across the river. It's a foot above where Irene was, which was supposed to be an extreme event. But again, I'm not getting a whole lot of help because I'm not in the floodplain. On the positive side, there's a lot of homes still that are waiting for their buyout money from FEMA, and I didn't need to do that. There were two chimneys, the center one, and the center one didn't survive the raising. It crumbled. The old fireplace is gone. This is what it looks like looking up from through the non-existent first floor. There's a lot of other things. It was a good tooth cleaning. There were a couple of rotted sills, and there was a place where the post and beam didn't join. So this is, I found a horse logger from Chelsea who typically, like in Vermont, had a degree in environmental policy, and asked him if he could build me a breakwater, and sent him articles on how you build breakwaters over the winter. And he was an artist too. You see the duck head there as a frontispiece going up. And the curves that he put in the stairs and around the wall to try to convince the river to work with us, to go around the house the next time instead of through it. It raged through the house that had forced to pick up my grandmother's piano and toss it sideways. So it's a massive stone wall. What I want you to see in this picture is the fork in the tree, which had a stump in it after the flood, up in that fork that was headed for the house like a cannonball. So the point of this picture is how important landscaping is and the protection that it gives as well. The stones in the front corner are the most massive. They're the size that they're down in the ground quite a ways. The rubble from the old stone foundation is behind that, like a typical breakwater wall. So this is the other side of the fortune of not being in the floodplain. In this case, there's shrubs here that are about a dozen shrubs that will be 10 or 12 feet wide and high that will help to break the force of the river and get it so that it's not moving quite so raging by the time it reaches the house. And when it comes across the road, it'll go whoomp into that hole and go up a slight hill before it gets going towards the house as well. What the advantage of being outside the floodplain is that you're not allowed, if you're in the floodplain, to do that kind of hardscaping and filling as I did with that wall. So now this is the back side of the house getting around 3 years later. This is what it actually looks like currently. And the bulkhead and the windows are the pieces that are the lowest parts, the most vulnerable. And they'll have rubber gasket shields that we'll build for those. And this is getting around to the front side and what happened with the garage, which won't be rebuilt. And there's railings now in the porch. So 3 years later, it's almost back together.